Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Hello and welcome everybody to today's video where I'm going to be painting a Flamer of Tzeentch. Now these can be pretty intimidating because they have a really crazy color palette and you have to do some blending, but as it turns out there's only a few areas that can get kind of tricky. So let's get to it. We're going to start with blocking in the base colors. So for the blue I'm using Calidor Sky. Now while I'm finishing up this here, I decided to prime it in a gray, not black because I want it nice and bright, but white and I don't get along very well. I miss too many spots and then it just shows up. So color in with the blue. Then the top part area, get a nice deep, fairly dark purple. For this one I just happened to use the Vallejo color I had. You're also going to be painting the arms about halfway down, all of the face. There's one other area that we're going to paint purple, but before we can paint that purple, we'll have to lay down the last color, and that's the bottom third of the model, which is going to be a white. But for now, just make sure you get a decent base coat. Don't worry about the paint getting over onto the blue area or onto the flames, anything like that. Alright, so for our third color, we want it to be a white, but we're going to start with Celestra Gray and we're going to highlight up from there rather than starting with a really bright white. As I said, the trick with this is trying to blend these colors. The blue and the purple will blend fairly nicely together on their own. The white and the blue will be a little bit trickier. Now for all three of these base colors I did have to do 2 coats, even that purple that has a really strong pigment, but every single one of them you're going to want 2 coats. Now once the coats are dry, we'll do our first wash. And this one you just want to get over the blue and the white. It's going to sound a little weird, but you're going to be using that dark blue wash over the white area. And you'll see why. It's going to help create our shadow for when we're highlighting up with the white. Now you'll notice that I also painted those tendrils that purple. It was much easier to paint the whole thing white and then go back over it with purple than to try and do it another way. But put the blue wash all over the blue and all over the white. Then we're going to use Druki Violet to darken down the purple just a bit, color the shaded areas. The blue and the white we're going to highlight up from there. The purple, we're just going to edge highlight it. There's not a whole lot more that we want to do with it because the model's supposed to get darker the closer you go from its tail to its head. Alright, now let's try highlighting back up that white. So first thing we're going to go back to our base color, which is the Celestra Gray. Paint all over the entire white area except for the very deepest crevices and recesses. For that we're just going to let the gray with the blue wash over top be our shadow. You're definitely going to need a couple coats for this, but with each coat paint a little bit further away from the edge of the last one and it will help create a nice even blend going from the dark gray through to the brightest white. Okay, now the purpose of the shade was just to get our dark recessed areas. We actually want this model to be very bright, so we're going to go back now and repaint over most of the blue surface with our initial Calidor Sky, getting all the muscles, getting all of the areas except maybe for example between the shoulder blades there, but everything else go back over it with the blue to help bring that color back up. Now if you're feeling kind of lazy, you could technically skip the chest there. Not many folks are going to see that even if they pick it up. But that's totally up to you. You highlight where you want. Just make sure that you get a nice strong blue back to brighten up the model. Alright, using Techless Blue, we're going to apply a highlight over most of the wider blue areas. So kind of like what we did with the white, paint on the Techless and each layer get a little bit further from the last time you painted it on. Get the raised edges like the tendrils here, the shoulder blades, the top part of the bulge on the muscles, and this will really start to make it look really nice and bright. Now when it comes to highlighting the purple, we're just going to do an edge highlight. So using this very light magenta, almost a lilac color, we're just going to pick out the very raised edges. So the I don't know what you call the spines, the bones in the arm here, the webbing, it almost looks like Spider-Man a little bit. But you should be able to see the parts that you want to highlight because they're going to stick out. They're going to be very prominent. So we'll get them all over the hands and then we'll get to the head and all the faces. Now this was a bit of a nightmare because there's like 5 faces all bursting out of the top of this thing and each one has different areas of highlight and shade. Take your time. Don't worry about trying to get them all. This isn't a piece that we're trying to submit to the Golden Demon. Get enough so that you can see distinction between the various faces. You can tell where the eye is and maybe where the edge of the mouth is, but don't stress over trying to perfectly highlight every single edge. Remember, we're going for good enough. All right, now we want to get some blending in. So for this part, put a blob of a wet blue and a blob of the wet white just below it. Then clean off the brush, get it fairly dry, and start to swirl those two wet paints together before they dry. This is called wet blending, and I'm not that good at it. As you can see here, I have a little bit of trouble with the initial wet blend. So I end up having to go back, getting another bit of blob of the blue, and I bring it back in and swirl it some more bit, and you can see here then it works out pretty well. And you get a nice blending of those two colors. It's something you want to practice because it's very, very difficult. Going back to the last little bit of highlighting on the purple there, using that same lilac color, and at this point you're almost done. You could just about put that on the tabletop. You just got to do the flames. If you wanted to do one more layer of muscle with Lothar and blue, just get subtle lines to separate the lightest from the darkest. So the V on the deltoid, the very tips of the tendrils there, the very edge of the muscle where it starts to curve back into the arm, and that will really make the arms kind of pop and give a lot of definition. All right, let's also head back to the lower areas to finish off highlighting the white. So with Ulthuan Gray, we're going to paint over most of that Celestra Gray, but again, with each layer, just come right to the edge of the previous one and leave a little bit of that previous color showing. Now with this white, Ulthuan Gray, it's a great white color, but it's very, very thin. So you're going to have to do several coats of this. So it's almost like a merry-go-round. Just start at the bottom of the model, paint, turn, keep painting the area. By the time you get back to where you began, that first layer is dry, and you can just keep circling around and painting until you get it up to the brightness that you're looking for. All right, we're on to almost the last really, really big part, and those are all of the flames. So to do this, we're going to start off with the base coat of ceramite white. Now it's a very strong paint. It's got a really good pigment to it, but you're still going to need 2 coats simply because everything shows through a white paint. So go slowly, take your time, make sure you turn around the model, looking at it frequently to make sure you get all the different places where fire is spurting out of this thing, because believe me, there are a lot. Now, while we're waiting for that either first or second coat of the white on the flames to dry, let's take care of the teeth that are coming out at the various exits, if you will, of this thing. I feel like a dentist. I'm using a very tiny tool to make sure the gums are okay. But using a red, a magenta, something like that, paint the gum line at all the openings of the mouth, at the bottom, the arms have them too. Then get your favorite kind of ivory color or basic tooth color. For this one I start with Xandri Dust. Go around the model, look at the arms, look at the mouths, look at the base there, the bottom, and give a nice base coat to all the different teeth that are all over this thing. And again, like the flames, there's lots, they're everywhere. You're probably gonna miss some. I know I did. Don't worry about it. We're still in a learning process here. Okay, now that the white is dry, we're gonna use Colia Green shade to make the flames look mystical. They're magical. These aren't typical flames. One of the things about fire is typically the fire gets darker as you come away from the base. With these flames, we're going to do the opposite. The fire is going to be darker closer to the base, closer to the inside of the flames themselves. So you can use any kind of color you want. You can bust out the contrast if you want a different color there, but just make sure you cover everything, give it a nice good coat so there's lots of paint or of wash to sink down. While we're waiting for that to dry so we can touch it up, we'll go around to the various eyes and give just a dab of ceramite white, and then you can go back with the Colia Green shade to color those. We'll also put a layer of Ushabti bone or some other light beige color, khaki, ivory, to give the teeth a little bit of definition. And then once we're finished highlighting the teeth, there's really only 1 or 2 steps left. Now at this part, you could be done if you wanted to, and you'll still have a great looking model. If you wanted to do just a little bit more to it to add a little bit more definition, there's a couple other layers we can do on the flames. So starting with Ulthuan Grey again, get the flames just at the very tips or areas that are raised up the most if they're not at the ends or at the tips. That'll just give kind of this subtle contrast between the darkest areas where the shade soaked in and the areas that are going to be farthest away. So this is a little counterintuitive to what fire usually looks like. Fire typically gets darker as it gets further away from the center of the flames. In this case, we're going backwards, but that's okay, because that adds to the mystique. A last very, very end touch highlight of White Scar to just set off a few of those last tips, and there you have it. A Flamer of Tzeentch that I think looks pretty darn good. It might not win you a Golden Demon, but I'd say that's good enough.